A shabbily dressed millionaire was humiliated by an employee of a luxury store in front of everyone. But 2 days later, he decided to do something that left everyone in shock. The late afternoon sun reflected off the storefronts of the city's luxurious shopping avenue. Amidst the bustle of pedestrians and the roar of luxury car engines, a man walked purposefully towards the most exclusive store on the street. His name was Andrew Morgan, though no one would recognize him at first glance. Dressed in worn jeans, a white t-shirt, and a weathered leather jacket, Andrew didn't fit the typical profile of customers at Olympus, the most prestigious boutique in the city. However, beneath this simple appearance was hidden one of the wealthiest men in the country. Known for his philanthropy and constant fight against inequality, Andrew paused in front of Olympus's imposing glass and marble facade. For a moment, his mind traveled to the past, to those days when, as an 18-year-old, he had worked as a salesman in this very store. He remembered the long shifts, the snubs from wealthy customers, and above all, the contemptuous treatment from the manager at the time, a man named Edward Vincent. With a sigh, Andrew pushed those memories from his mind. Today was not the day to relive old wounds. He had come with a specific purpose, to buy a gift for his mother, who would soon be turning 70. And incidentally to see if things had changed at Olympus since his departure 2 decades ago. As he pushed open the heavy glass door, a bell announced his entrance. The store's interior was a display of luxury and elegance. Crystal chandeliers illuminated shelves laden with designer handbags, while jewels that cost more than most people's annual salaries rested in glass display cases. Andrew advanced calmly, observing every detail. His eyes settled on a beautiful leather handbag, just the style his mother would love. He was about to approach when a sharp voice interrupted him. "Excuse me, sir. Can I help you with something?" Andrew turned to find himself face to face with a middle-aged man, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit. His face, framed by gold-rimmed glasses, wore a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Good afternoon," Andrew responded politely. "I was interested in looking at that handbag over there." The man, wearing a badge that identified him as James Morrison, general manager, looked Andrew up and down with a barely disguised look of disdain. "I'm afraid that handbag might be out of your budget, sir," James said in a condescending tone. "Perhaps you can find something more suitable in one of the shops on the side street." Andrew felt as if an icy fist had gripped his stomach. The situation felt painfully familiar. For a moment, it was as if the years hadn't passed, and he was once again that insecure young man, facing the prejudices of those who judged him by his appearance. But Andrew was no longer that young man. 2 decades of hard work, successes and failures had forged him into a confident man. With a calm smile, he addressed the manager. "I appreciate your concern, Mr. Morrison, but I'd like to see the handbag anyway." James frowned, visibly annoyed by Andrew's insistence. "Sir, I assure you that—" "Is something wrong, Mr. Morrison?" A new voice joined the conversation. A young man, no older than 25, dressed in the store uniform, approached with a look of genuine concern on his face. "It's nothing, Charlie," James responded brusquely. "I was just explaining to this gentleman that he may have wandered into the wrong store." Charlie looked at Andrew and then at the manager, and something in his expression changed. With a kind smile, he addressed Andrew. "Excuse me, sir. Can I help you with anything?" Before Andrew could respond, James intervened. "Charlie, I have the situation under control. Go attend to the customers in the jewelry section." But Charlie, in an act of bravery that surprised even Andrew, didn't move. "With all due respect, Mr. Morrison, I think I can be of help here." James, his face reddening with anger, was about to respond when Andrew spoke. "Actually, I'd love for Charlie to show me that handbag," he said, pointing to the object of his interest. The tension in the air was palpable. Other customers began to look in their direction, drawn by the scene unfolding. James, aware of the unwanted attention, nodded curtly and walked away, but not before casting a warning glance at Charlie. The young salesman, visibly relieved, guided Andrew towards the handbag. "It's an exquisite piece," he commented, as he carefully removed it from the display case. "The finest Italian leather, with 24-karat gold details. It's a limited edition." Andrew examined the handbag with a critical eye. It was, without a doubt, a work of art. "It's perfect," he finally said. "I'll take it." Charlie seemed surprised for a moment, but quickly recovered. "Excellent choice, sir. Would you like it gift-wrapped?" "Please." Andrew nodded. As Charlie busied himself with preparing the package, Andrew couldn't help but notice the sidelong glances James was casting their way from across the store. When it came time to pay, Andrew pulled out a black credit card from his wallet. Charlie's eyes widened as he recognized the exclusive card, reserved only for the wealthiest clients. "Thank you for your purchase, sir," said Charlie, handing him the bag with the gift. "It's been a pleasure serving you." Andrew took the bag and, before leaving, looked Charlie directly in the eyes. "Thank you, Charlie. Your kindness and professionalism are a credit to this store." As he headed towards the exit, Andrew could hear James's angry voice reprimanding Charlie. He paused for a moment, considering whether he should intervene, but decided it wasn't yet the time. He had a plan, and this was only the first step. As he left Olympus, Andrew took a deep breath of the evening air. The experience had been intense, reviving old ghosts and awakening emotions he thought he had forgotten. But it had also shown him that despite the years, some things hadn't changed at Olympus. As he walked to his car, Andrew made a decision. He would return to Olympus, but next time, things would be very different. With a determined smile on his face, he walked away down the avenue, leaving behind the store that had once belittled him, but would soon learn the true meaning of respect and humility. The next 2 days were a whirlwind of activity for Andrew Morgan: meetings with lawyers, calls to trusted contacts, and long hours reviewing financial documents occupied every minute of his time. But despite the frenzy, a smile of anticipation never left his face. On the morning of the 3rd day after his visit to Olympus, Andrew was in his office in the penthouse of a skyscraper in the city center. He wore a tailored suit that highlighted his elegant bearing, a drastic change from his casual appearance days earlier. "Is everything ready, Lisa?" he asked his personal assistant, a middle-aged woman with a sharp and efficient look. "Everything as planned, Mr. Morgan," Lisa replied, handing him a folder. "The purchase documents are ready to be signed. Olympus's board of directors suspects nothing. They think it's a routine acquisition by an anonymous conglomerate." Andrew nodded, leafing through the documents. "Excellent work, Lisa. What about the staff information?" Lisa pulled out another folder from her briefcase. "Here are the files of all Olympus employees, including the general manager, James Morrison, and the young salesman, Charlie Roberts." Andrew paused at Charlie's photo, remembering his kindness amidst the manager's hostility. "What can you tell me about him?" "Charlie Roberts, 24 years old. He's been working at Olympus for 2 years. He studies business administration at night. According to his evaluations, he's one of the most efficient employees and beloved by customers, although he's had several run-ins with management due to his, let's say, excess of empathy with customers who don't fit the store's usual profile." Andrew smiled. "Sounds like someone who understands the true meaning of customer service." "And Morrison?" Lisa's expression turned serious. "James Morrison, 45 years old. He's been at Olympus for 15 years, the last 5 as general manager. He was Edward Vincent's protege, the former manager." Hearing that name, Andrew felt a pang of pain. Edward Vincent had been the manager who had humiliated and fired him years ago, the catalyst that drove him to forge his own path. "Morrison has a questionable history," Lisa continued. "Several complaints from employees about abusive treatment, although all were dismissed. There are also rumors of unethical sales practices, but nothing that could be proven." Andrew closed the folder, his determination reinforced. "Thank you, Lisa. I think it's time to put our plan into action." As he headed to Olympus in his discreet but luxurious car, Andrew mentally reviewed each step of his plan. It wasn't about revenge, he reminded himself. It was an opportunity to correct injustices, to demonstrate that success and wealth were not at odds with empathy and respect. Upon arriving at the store, Andrew noticed his heart was pounding. For a moment he hesitated. Was he doing the right thing? Wasn't he abusing his power in the same way others had done to him in the past? But as he entered and saw the look of disdain James Morrison gave him, recognizing him from the previous incident, Andrew knew he was doing the right thing. This time, however, he wasn't alone. Behind him entered Lisa and a serious-looking man carrying a briefcase. "Good afternoon," Andrew greeted with a firm voice. "I'd like to speak with Mr. Morrison and Charlie Roberts, please." James approached, his face a mask of false courtesy. "Sir, I assured you last time that this store may not be suitable for your possibilities. I suggest," Andrew interrupted, his voice calm but full of authority, "that you gather all the staff in the main area of the store. I have an important announcement to make." Something in Andrew's tone made James hesitate. He looked at Lisa and the man with the briefcase, clearly disconcerted. "Sir, I don't know who you think you are, but I'm the new owner of Olympus," Andrew declared, his voice resonating throughout the store, "and I'm giving you a direct order, Mr. Morrison." The silence that followed this declaration was absolute. Customers who were in the store looked at the scene with a mixture of confusion and curiosity. The employees, who had been discreetly observing, seemed paralyzed. James visibly paled. I don't understand. How is this possible?" "Everything will be explained shortly," Andrew replied. "Now, please, gather the staff." As James, still in a state of shock, hurried to comply with the order, Andrew saw Charlie emerging from the back room, clearly confused by the commotion. Within minutes, all of Olympus's staff was gathered in the main area of the store. The employees formed a nervous semicircle around Andrew, Lisa, and the man with the briefcase. James Morrison stood to one side, his face a mixture of confusion and fear. Andrew stepped forward, his presence filling the space. "Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrew Morgan, and as I just informed Mr. Morrison, I am the new owner of Olympus." A murmur of surprise ran through the group. Some employees exchanged looks of astonishment, while others seemed concerned about what this change might mean for their jobs. "I know this is unexpected," Andrew continued, "but I assure you that you have nothing to fear, at least most of you." His gaze briefly rested on James, who shifted uncomfortably. "2 days ago, I came to this store dressed casually. I wanted to see how you treated someone who didn't seem to fit the usual profile of your customers." Andrew paused, letting his words sink in. "What I saw reminded me why I decided to buy this store in the first place." The man with the briefcase stepped forward, opening his portfolio and extracting a set of documents. "These are the papers certifying the transfer of ownership. As you can see, everything is in order." James, regaining some of his composure, ventured to speak. "Mr. Morgan, I don't understand why buy Olympus, and why in this manner." Andrew smiled, but it was a smile laden with complex emotions. "For you see, Mr. Morrison, this store has a special meaning for me. 20 years ago, I worked here as a salesman." The revelation provoked another wave of murmurs among the employees. Charlie, who had been listening attentively, stepped forward, his eyes bright with understanding. You were the customer from the other day," Charlie said, "the one with the handbag for your mother." Andrew nodded, directing a warm smile at the young man. "That's right, Charlie. And I must thank you for your kindness and professionalism. You were the only one who treated me with respect that day." James paled even more, realizing the magnitude of his error. "Mr. Morgan, I had no idea. Please allow me to explain." "There's nothing to explain, Mr. Morrison," Andrew interrupted, his voice firm but not devoid of compassion. "Your actions speak for themselves, and unfortunately they're not. Very different from the actions of your mentor, Edward Vincent, 20 years ago." A tense silence fell over the store. Andrew continued, "When I worked here, I was treated with the same disdain and prejudice that you showed towards me the other day. Edward Vincent humiliated me and fired me, all because I didn't fit his idea of what an Olympus salesperson should be." James's eyes widened in surprise. You knew Edward?" "More than I would have liked," Andrew replied with a hint of bitterness. "But that experience drove me to forge my own path. I promised myself that someday I would return, not for revenge, but to ensure that no one else would be treated the way I was." Andrew paused, looking at each of the employees. "Olympus is going to change from today on. This store will be an example of excellence in customer service, but not just for those who can afford our most expensive products. We will treat every person who walks through that door with the same respect and dignity, regardless of their appearance or purchasing power." Then, addressing James directly, Andrew adopted a more severe tone. "Mr. Morrison, I'm afraid your services will no longer be needed at Olympus." James seemed to crumble at these words. But Mr. Morgan, I've dedicated 15 years of my life to this store. Please, give me another chance. I can change. I can adapt to your vision." Andrew looked at him for a long moment, considering his words. Finally, he spoke. "Mr. Morrison, compassion and the ability to give second chances are values I appreciate. However, the change I seek in Olympus requires fresh leadership and a different mindset." Then, to everyone's surprise, he added, "Nevertheless, I won't leave you helpless, Lisa. Please give Mr. Morrison the details of the severance package we've prepared." Lisa approached James and handed him an envelope. "You'll find a generous financial compensation as well as resources for training and job relocation," she explained. James took the envelope with trembling hands, a mixture of relief and shame on his face. "I thank you, Mr. Morgan. I don't know what to say." "There's no need to say anything," Andrew replied. "I just hope this experience serves as a lesson about the value of respect and humility." Turning to the rest of the staff, Andrew continued, "As for the new leadership of Olympus, I believe I've already found the right person." His eyes fell on Charlie, who looked at him in amazement. "Charlie Roberts, I'd like to offer you the position of General Manager of Olympus." A collective gasp ran through the store. Charlie, visibly shocked, stammered, "I, Mr. Morgan. It's an honor, but are you sure? I'm very young and—" Andrew smiled. "You are young, yes, but you've demonstrated exactly the qualities I'm looking for in a leader: empathy, respect, and a genuine desire to serve others. You'll have my full support, and Lisa's to learn the technical aspects of the business." Charlie, still stunned, nodded slowly. "Thank you, Mr. Morgan. I promise not to let you down." "I'm sure you won't," Andrew replied. Then, addressing the rest of the staff, he concluded, "Starting tomorrow, we'll begin a new era for Olympus. I hope to count on all of you to make this store an example of excellence and humanity in the world of luxury retail." As the employees began to disperse, still processing the events of the last hour, Andrew approached James, who was silently gathering his things. "Mr. Morrison," Andrew said in a low voice, "there's something else you should know." James looked at him, expectant and fearful at the same time. "You and I, we're distant relatives," Andrew revealed. James's eyes widened. "What? But how is that possible?" "My grandmother and your grandfather were cousins," Andrew explained. "I discovered it during my investigation into Olympus and its staff. It's a distant connection, but it exists." James seemed to be struggling to find the right words. I didn't know, Mr. Morgan. If I had known, you would have treated me differently." Andrew interrupted, his voice laden with emotion. "That's precisely the point, Mr. Morrison. We shouldn't treat people with respect only because they're related to us or because they have money or power. Respect should be universal." James lowered his head, shame evident on his face. "You're right, I've made many mistakes." "We all make mistakes," said Andrew, his tone softening. "The important thing is to learn from them and strive to be better. I hope you use this experience as an opportunity to reflect and grow." With these words, Andrew extended his hand. After a moment of hesitation, James shook it. "Thank you, Mr. Morgan," said James, his voice barely a whisper. "I won't forget this lesson." As James walked away, Andrew stood looking at the door of Olympus, reflecting on the unexpected turns his life had taken. What had begun as a desire for personal justice had become an opportunity to change the lives of many people. With a smile of satisfaction, Andrew turned to Charlie, who was nervously waiting for his instructions. "Well, Charlie," he said, "we have a lot of work ahead of us. Are you ready to transform Olympus?" Charlie nodded enthusiastically. "More than ready, Mr. Morgan. Where do we start?" "From the beginning." Andrew replied, "We're going to rewrite Olympus's history one sale at a time." And so, as the sun began to set over the city, a new era began for Olympus. An era of respect, compassion, and opportunities for all. Andrew Morgan, the boy who was once looked down upon, now had the power to change things, and he was determined to use it for good. The following days were a whirlwind of activity at Olympus. Andrew, with the help of Charlie and Lisa, dove headfirst into the task of transforming the store. Old policies were discarded, and new guidelines were implemented that emphasized equal and respectful treatment of all customers. Charlie, in his new role as general manager, proved to be a natural leader. His enthusiasm was contagious, and soon the Olympus staff began to adopt the new philosophy with genuine interest. One morning, as Andrew watched Charlie lead a training session for the staff, he couldn't help but smile with pride. "You've done an excellent job, Charlie," he commented when the session ended. Charlie blushed slightly at the praise. "Thank you, Mr. Morgan. But all of this is thanks to you. You've given us a new perspective, a new way of seeing our work." Andrew shook his head. "I just gave you the opportunity. You're the ones making it work." As they walked through the store, Andrew noticed that several employees were greeting customers with genuine warmth, regardless of their appearance. It was a notable change from the cold and elitist atmosphere that had prevailed before. "Have you heard from James?" Andrew asked, his tone becoming more serious. Charlie nodded. "Yes, actually, he called me a couple of days ago. He sounded different, more humble. He asked me to convey his apologies and gratitude for the opportunity to start." "Over to you," Andrew nodded thoughtfully. "I'm glad to hear that sometimes people need a push to realize their mistakes and change." At that moment, the store door opened and an elderly woman entered, dressed simply. Immediately, one of the younger saleswomen approached her with a kind smile. Andrew and Charlie observed the interaction from afar. The saleswoman listened attentively to the woman, who was apparently looking for a gift for her granddaughter. After a few minutes, the saleswoman guided her to a section of the store that Andrew didn't recognize. "What's that area?" Andrew asked, intrigued. Charlie smiled proudly. "Ah, that's one of the new initiatives we implemented. It's our accessible luxury section. High quality products, but at more affordable prices. We wanted to make sure everyone could take home something special from Olympus, regardless of their budget." Andrew looked at Charlie with a mixture of surprise and admiration. "That's a brilliant idea, Charlie. How did you come up with it?" "Well," Charlie replied, "I remembered what you told us about your experience here 20 years ago. I thought that if someone like you, who later became a successful businessman, was judged by your appearance, how many other talented and valuable people could be going through the same thing I wanted Olympus to be? A place where everyone felt welcome and valued." Andrew felt a wave of emotion. "Charlie, you've perfectly captured the essence of what I wanted to achieve with Olympus. I'm impressed." As they continued to observe, they saw how the saleswoman helped the elderly woman choose a beautiful silver bracelet. The smile on the customer's face as she paid for her purchase was testimony to the success of Olympus's new philosophy. "You know, Charlie," said Andrew as they headed towards the office, "I think it's time to think big. Olympus has changed for the better. But what if we take this change beyond our doors?" Charlie looked at him curiously. "What do you have in mind, Mr. Morgan?" Andrew smiled, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. "I was thinking about an internship program for young people from disadvantaged communities. We could offer them the opportunity to learn about the luxury retail business, give them practical skills, and who knows, maybe discover some hidden talents." Charlie's eyes lit up at the idea. "That would be amazing, Mr. Morgan. We could change real lives with a program like that." "Exactly," Andrew nodded. "And you, Charlie, would be the perfect candidate to lead this program. Your own success story would be an inspiration to these young people." Charlie was speechless for a moment, overwhelmed by the trust Andrew was placing in him. I'd be honored, Mr. Morgan, but do you think I'm ready for such a big responsibility?" Andrew put a hand on Charlie's shoulder. "I think you've demonstrated more than enough capacity and heart for this, Charlie. Besides, I'll be here to support you every step of the way." As they discussed the details of the internship program, they didn't notice that someone had entered the store and was watching them from afar. It was James Morrison. James stood near the entrance, his expression a mixture of nostalgia and regret. He observed how the employees interacted with the customers, noticing the palpable change in the store's atmosphere. It was as if Olympus had come to life, full of an energy and warmth it had never had under his direction. Finally gathering courage, James approached Andrew and Charlie. "Mr. Morgan, Charlie," he greeted with a trembling voice. Both men turned, surprised by James's sudden appearance. "Mr. Morrison," Andrew responded, his tone cautious but not hostile. "We weren't expecting to see you here." James nodded, clearly uncomfortable. "I know, and I'm sorry if my presence is inopportune. I felt I needed to come and see for myself the changes I had heard about." Charlie, always the diplomat, offered a small smile. "And what do you think, Mr. Morrison?" James looked around once more before responding. "It's surprising. The store feels different, more alive. I never thought that treating all customers with respect, regardless of their appearance, could have such a positive impact." Andrew studied James for a moment. The man before him seemed to have aged years in the few weeks since his dismissal. There was a humility in his posture that hadn't existed before. "Mr. Morrison," Andrew began, "I appreciate your honesty. It must not have been easy for you to come here today." James shook his head. "No, it wasn't. But I felt it was necessary. Mr. Morgan, Charlie, I want to apologize again for my behavior. I've spent the last few weeks reflecting on my actions, and I've realized how much harm I've caused over the years with my arrogance and prejudices." There was a moment of silence as Andrew and Charlie processed James's words. Finally, Andrew spoke. "James," he said, using his first name for the first time, "recognizing our mistakes is the first step towards true change. I appreciate your sincerity." James nodded, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "Thank you, Mr. Morgan. I've been looking for work, but I've realized that I need to fundamentally change my approach before I can lead others again." Charlie, moved by James's vulnerability, intervened. "Mr. Morrison, we were discussing a new internship program for young people from disadvantaged communities. Maybe you'd be interested in participating as a mentor. Your experience in the business would be invaluable, and it could be an opportunity for you to put that new approach you speak of into practice." Andrew looked at Charlie with a mixture of surprise and pride. The young man's ability to see the best in people, even in someone who had treated him poorly in the past, was truly admirable. James seemed equally surprised by the offer. I don't know what to say. Would you be willing to give me that opportunity after everything I did?" Andrew considered the situation for a moment before responding. "Mr. Morrison, when I bought Olympus, I did so with the intention of creating a place where second chances were possible. It would be hypocritical of me to deny you that same opportunity. Besides," he added with a small smile, "I think your experience, both positive and negative, could be a valuable lesson for these young people. Sometimes we learn as much from our mistakes as from our successes." James seemed overwhelmed with emotion. I deeply thank you. I promise I won't waste this opportunity. I'll do everything I can to redeem myself and to help these young people not make the same mistakes I did." "That's all we can ask," said Andrew. Extending his hand, James took it, thus sealing a new chapter in Olympus's history. As the three men began to discuss the details of the internship program, a sense of hope and possibility filled the air. Olympus was no longer simply a luxury store. It was becoming a beacon of change and second chances. Outside, the sun shone brightly over the city, as if the universe itself was smiling at. This unexpected alliance, Olympus transformation, was far from over. But with each step, with each life touched, it came closer to Andrew's vision of a world where respect and dignity were truly universal. The following months saw Olympus transform not only into a respected luxury store, but into a symbol of social change in the city. The internship program, christened New Horizons, quickly became the heart of Olympus's new mission. One sunny afternoon, Andrew observed from his office, as Charlie and James guided a group of young interns through the store. It was a sight that still filled him with wonder. The young man who was once looked down upon, and the man who once represented everything that was wrong in the world of luxury, now working together to inspire the next generation. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," said Andrew. Lisa entered holding a folder. "Mr. Morgan, I have the reports you requested on the impact of the New Horizons program." Andrew smiled, gesturing for her to sit down. "Excellent. Lisa, what do we have? Lisa opened the folder and began to read. In the last 6 months, we've had 50 interns in the program. Of those, 30 have been hired in full-time jobs, 15 of them here at Olympus. The other 20 have decided to continue their education with partial scholarships funded by the foundation we established. Andrew nodded, clearly pleased. Those are impressive numbers. And what about the impact on our business? Surprisingly positive, Lisa replied with a smile. Our sales have increased by 25% compared to last year. The accessible luxury section that Charlie implemented has been a resounding success, attracting a new customer base without alienating our traditional clientele. Incredible, Andrew murmured. And what about public perception? Lisa turned to the next page of her report. We've received very positive media coverage. Several newspapers and magazines have highlighted Olympus as an example of corporate social responsibility. We've even been nominated for an award in sustainable business innovation. Andrew leaned back in his chair, a smile of satisfaction on his face. Lisa, when I bought this store, I hoped to make a difference, but this exceeds my most optimistic expectations. And much of the credit is yours, Mr. Morgan, Lisa said sincerely. Your vision and leadership have been fundamental to this success. Andrew shook his head. I've played my part, yes, but this has been a team effort. Charlie, James, you, every employee and intern, everyone has contributed to making Olympus what it is today. At that moment, another person knocked. On the door it was Charlie, with an expression of excitement on his face. Mr. Morgan, excuse the interruption, but there's someone who wants to see you, said Charlie. Andrew looked at Lisa, who nodded and stood up to leave. Of course, Charlie. Who is it? Charlie stepped aside, revealing a young woman of about 20. Dressed in the Olympus uniform, Andrew recognized her as one of the first interns in the program. Mr. Morgan, the young woman began, her voice trembling with emotion. I'm Mary Garcia. I was part of the first class of New Horizons. Andrew stood up to greet her. Of course, Mary. I remember you well. How can I help you? Mary took a deep breath before continuing. I wanted to thank you personally for the opportunity you gave me. Before New Horizons, I thought a career in the luxury fashion world was impossible for someone like me. But you, Charlie, and Mr. Morrison showed me that with hard work and the right guidance, anything is possible. Andrew felt a wave of emotion at Mary's words. I'm very glad to hear that, Mary, but the credit is yours. You took the opportunity and worked hard to get where you are. Mary smiled, her eyes shining. Thank you, Mr. Morgan. But there's something else I wanted to tell you. I've been accepted into the Paris School of Fashion Design. Andrew and Charlie exchanged looks of surprise and joy. Mary, that's wonderful. Andrew exclaimed, Congratulations. All of this is thanks to Olympus and the New Horizons program, Mary continued. And I wanted to ask you something, Mr. Morgan. I'd like, if possible, to keep working here during my school holidays. I want to continue being part of this family and help other young people like me find their way. Andrew felt his heart swell with pride. Mary, it would be an honor to have you back at Olympus whenever you wish. You're a perfect example of what we hope to achieve with New Horizons. Mary, unable to contain her emotion, impulsively hugged Andrew. For a moment, Andrew was surprised, but then returned the hug with equal warmth. When Mary left, overflowing with joy and gratitude, Andrew turned to Charlie. You know, moments like this make it all worthwhile. Charlie nodded, equally moved. Yes, Mr. Morgan. It's incredible to see how our work is changing real lives. Andrew looked out the window, observing the bustling street outside, Olympus. Charlie, I think it's time to think even bigger. Olympus has proven that it's possible to combine business success with social responsibility. What if we take this model to other stores, to other cities? Charlie's eyes lit up at the idea. Are you thinking of expanding? Olympus? Andrew smiled. Not just expanding, Charlie. I'm thinking of creating a network of stores that follow the Olympus model. Imagine the impact we could have if we took New Horizons to a national level or even international. Charlie seemed overwhelmed by the magnitude of the idea. That would be incredible, Mr. Morgan. but also a huge challenge. No doubt, Andrew nodded, but I think we've demonstrated that we're capable of overcoming great challenges, and with people like you, James and Mary by our side, I know we can achieve it. As Andrew and Charlie began to discuss the details of this new vision, the sun began to set over the city, bathing the office in a warm, golden glow. It was as if the universe itself was giving its approval to this new chapter in Olympus's history. Outside, life in the city continued its frantic pace, but inside Olympus, the seeds of a change that would soon extend far beyond its walls were being sown. The story of Andrew Morgan, the boy who was once looked down upon and who was now changing lives, was far from over. The expansion plan for Olympus was advancing at full speed. In the following months, Andrew and his team worked tirelessly to open new stores in other cities, each with its own New Horizons program. Success seemed inevitable, and the name Olympus was quickly becoming synonymous with luxury, with a social conscience. However, as often happens in life, fate had other plans. One autumn morning, Andrew arrived at the office to find Lisa waiting for him with a grave expression. "Good morning, Lisa," Andrew greeted, immediately noticing the tension on his assistant's face. "What's happening?" Lisa handed him a newspaper. "Mr. Morgan, I think you should see this." Andrew took the newspaper, and his heart sank as he read the headline, "Scandal at Olympus, Labor Exploitation Disguised as Charity." The article alleged that the New Horizons program was actually a scheme to obtain cheap labor, exploiting vulnerable young people under the facade of social responsibility. It cited supposed former interns who claimed to have been subjected to long hours of work without adequate compensation. "This is ridiculous," Andrew muttered, his voice trembling with indignation. "How can they say this? We've done everything possible to ensure our interns are treated fairly." At that moment, Charlie burst into the office, his face pale with concern. "Mr. Morgan, have you seen the news? It's everywhere, social media, television." Andrew nodded grimly. "I know, Charlie, I've just seen it." "What are we going to do?" asked Charlie, his voice laden with anxiety. "Everything we've worked for." Andrew stood up, his expression turning from shock to determination. "We're going to fight, Charlie. We won't allow lies and misunderstandings to destroy what we've built." Quickly, Andrew convened an emergency meeting with the entire Olympus management team. James, who now held the position of Director of Social Responsibility, was one of the first to arrive. "Mr. Morgan," James began, his voice trembling, "I want you to know that I'm willing to take full responsibility for this. After all, I oversee the New Horizons program." Andrew raised a hand to stop him. "No, James, this is no one's fault here. Someone is trying to discredit us, and we're going to get to the bottom of this together." Over the next few hours, the team worked frenetically to gather all possible information about the New Horizons program. They reviewed contracts, schedules, intern evaluations, anything that could demonstrate that the accusations were false. Meanwhile, social media was ablaze with the scandal. Hashtags like #Boycott Olympus and the luxury without ethics were trending. Some of their most prominent clients began to publicly distance themselves from the brand amidst the chaos. Andrew received an unexpected call. It was Mary Garcia, the former intern who was now studying in Paris. "Mr. Morgan," said Mary, her voice clear and firm over the phone, "I've just heard about what's happening. I want to help. I know the accusations are false, and I'm willing to speak publicly about my experience in New Horizons." Andrew felt a wave of gratitude. "Mary, I appreciate that enormously, but I don't want you to get caught up in this. You could face criticism, even threats." "With all due respect, Mr. Morgan," Mary interrupted, "Olympus and you gave me a chance when no one else would. You taught me to stand up for what's right. I can't stand by while they destroy all of that with lies." Moved by Mary's loyalty and courage, Andrew finally accepted her offer. In the following hours, more and more former interns began to reach out, all offering their support and willing to share their positive stories about New Horizons. As the team worked tirelessly to prepare their response to the accusations, Andrew retreated to his office for a moment. Looking out the window at the city that had once looked down on him, he couldn't help but feel a mixture of sadness and determination. "Mr. Morgan," Charlie's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "The legal team is ready to review our statement." Andrew turned to his young protege, noticing the dark circles under his eyes and the worry on his face. "Charlie, I want you to know that, whatever happens, I'm proud of what we've achieved here, of what you've achieved." Charlie nodded, a small smile appearing on his tired face. "Thank you, Mr. Morgan. I'm proud too, and we're not going to let this defeat us." Together, they returned to the conference room where the rest of the team was waiting. The night would be long, but Andrew knew that with people like Charlie, James, Mary, and all the others by his side, Olympus would survive this storm. As they prepared to face the press the next day, Andrew couldn't help but think about how far he had come since his days as a young, looked-down-upon salesman. The trials might be different now, but his determination remained the same. This time, however, he wasn't alone. He had an army of people whose lives he had touched and who were now willing to fight by his side. With that strength behind him, Andrew felt prepared to face any challenge that fate might put in his path. The true test of Olympus was about to come, and it would be one that would test not only their business model, but the very values on which Andrew had built his empire. The respect, integrity, and compassion that had been at the heart of Olympus from the beginning would now be their shield against the coming storm. The day dawned grey and rainy, as if the weather itself reflected the mood at Olympus. Andrew, dressed in a somber suit, prepared to face the press by his side. Charlie, James, and a group of former interns, including Mary, who had flown in from Paris the night before, formed a united front. "Remember," said Andrew, looking at each of them, "no matter what they say, we remain calm and stick to the truth. Our integrity is our best defense." When they went out to face the sea of cameras and microphones, Andrew felt a surge of determination. This was his chance to defend not only Olympus but the principles he believed in. "Good morning," Andrew began, his voice firm. "Despite the pressure, we're here to address the accusations made against Olympus and our New Horizons program. Let me be clear. These accusations are false and malicious." As Andrew presented the evidence they had gathered, showing contracts, testimonies, and financial data that demonstrated fair treatment of interns, the atmosphere in the room began to change. The journalists, initially skeptical, started to ask more balanced questions. Then, it was Mary's turn, and that of other former interns, to speak. Their emotional and sincere stories about how Olympus had changed their lives for the better had a visible impact on the audience. "Olympus didn't just give me a job," said Mary, her voice trembling with emotion, but firm in her conviction. "It gave me hope, it gave me a future, and I know I'm not the only one. There are hundreds like me whose lives have been transformed by New Horizons." As the press conference came to an end, Andrew noticed a change in the reporters' attitude. Hostile questions had given way to genuine curiosity about the program and its impact. However, the final blow was yet to come. James, who had been unusually quiet throughout the conference, stepped forward. "If you'll allow me," he said, his voice laden with emotion, "there's something else you should know." Andrew looked at him, surprised, but nodded for him to continue. I was contacted a few weeks ago by representatives of a rival luxury store chain," James revealed. "They offered me a considerable sum of money to provide information that could discredit Olympus." A collective gasp ran through the room. Andrew felt as if the ground was moving beneath his feet. "I considered the offer," James continued, tears forming in his eyes. "For a moment, the old version of me, the man I once was tempted. But then I thought about everything Olympus represents, about the second chance they gave me, about the young people whose lives we've changed, and I knew I couldn't do it." James turned to Andrew. "Mr. Morgan, I apologize for not informing you of this earlier. I wanted to gather concrete evidence before making such a serious accusation." The room erupted into a frenzy of questions and camera flashes. Andrew, overcoming his initial shock, placed a hand on James's shoulder in a gesture of support. "James," said Andrew, his voice amplified by the microphone so everyone could hear, Your honesty and integrity are a testament to what Olympus represents. Thank you for your courage." Turning to the journalists, Andrew continued, "Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, Olympus is not just a luxury store. We are a family, a community united by values of respect, integrity, and second chances. The accusations against us are not only false, but they are a deliberate attempt to undermine the good we are doing." The following hours were a whirlwind of additional interviews and statements. But as the day wore on, it became clear that the tide was turning. Social media, which had earlier been filled with criticism, now overflowed with messages of support. The hashtags #ISTAND, with Olympus, and luxury, with conscience began trending. That night, exhausted but triumphant, Andrew and his team gathered in his office. "We did it," said Charlie, a smile of relief on his face. "We did it together," corrected Andrew, looking at each of them with pride. Mary, who was preparing to return to Paris, the next day spoke up. "Mr. Morgan, what's next now?" Andrew smiled, a spark of determination in his eyes. "Now, Mary, we take our message even further. This crisis has shown us that there's much work to do, many people to educate about what luxury with conscience really means." "Are you thinking of expanding internationally?" asked James, a note of excitement in his voice. "Not just expanding," Andrew replied. "I'm thinking of creating a foundation, one that works not only with Olympus, but with other luxury companies to promote ethical practices and programs like New Horizons throughout the industry." Everyone's eyes lit up at the idea. The challenge they had faced, far from discouraging them, seemed to have inspired them to dream even bigger. As the team began to enthusiastically discuss the details of this new project, Andrew approached the window. The city sparkled under the moonlight, and for a moment, Andrew thought of the young salesman he once was, dreaming of a better future. "We did it," he murmured to himself, a smile of satisfaction on his face. "And this is just the beginning." The crisis had passed, but Olympus's true adventure was just beginning. With each challenge overcome, with each life transformed, Andrew and his team were rewriting what success meant in the world of luxury. And in the process, they were changing the world one person at a time. The months following the media crisis were a whirlwind of activity for Olympus. The attention generated by the scandal, far from harming the company, had catapulted its message of ethical luxury to the forefront of global conversation. Andrew, true to his word, had set in motion plans for the Olympus Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to promoting ethical practices in the luxury industry and expanding programs like New Horizons globally. One sunny morning, Andrew was in his office reviewing the final details for the official launch of the foundation. Charlie entered, carrying a stack of documents. "Good morning, Mr. Morgan," Charlie greeted with a smile. "I have good news. We've received confirmation of attendance from representatives of 5 of the world's top luxury brands for the Foundation's launch event." Andrew looked up from his papers, an expression of pleasant surprise on his face. "That's excellent, Charlie. It seems our message is resonating further than we expected." "It is," Charlie nodded enthusiastically. "And there's more." Mary called from Paris. Her sustainable design project has been selected for an exhibition at Paris Fashion Week. "Fantastic!" Andrew exclaimed, his face lighting up with paternal pride. "I always knew that girl would go far." "Did she mention if she'll be able to attend the launch?" "She said she wouldn't miss it for the world," Charlie replied. "In fact, she wants to present her collection as part of the Olympus Foundation initiative." Andrew leaned back in his chair, a smile of satisfaction on his face. "You know, Charlie, when I bought this store, I never imagined we'd come this far. It's incredible to see how a simple idea can grow and take on a life of its own." Charlie nodded, sitting down across from Andrew. "It's been an incredible journey, Mr. Morgan, and I think the best is yet to come." At that moment, James entered the office, his face beaming with excitement. "Mr. Morgan, Charlie, you have to see this," he said. Turning on the TV on the wall on the screen appeared a report about Olympus and its impact on the luxury industry. The reporter spoke enthusiastically about how the company had revolutionized the concept of ethical luxury and how other brands were beginning to follow its example. And in an unexpected turn, The reporter was saying, "Olympus's story has caught Hollywood's attention. Reliable sources report that a major studio is in talks to bring Andrew Morgan's inspiring story and Olympus's transformation to the big screen." Andrew, Charlie, and James looked at each other in astonishment. "A movie?" Andrew murmured, incredulous. "This is surreal." "It's incredible," said Charlie, smiling widely. "Your story will inspire millions, Mr. Morgan." James, who had been unusually quiet, spoke with an emotional voice. "Mr. Morgan, when I think about how I was when we met, about the man I was, and I see all this now, I can't express how grateful I am for the second chance you gave me." Andrew stood up and put a hand on James's shoulder. "We all deserve a second chance, James. The important thing is what we do with it, and you have proven to be an extraordinary man." The three men stood in silence for a moment, each reflecting on the incredible journey they had embarked on together. Finally, Andrew spoke. "Gentlemen, I think it's time we share our success beyond Olympus." Charlie and James looked at him curiously. "What do you have in mind, Mr. Morgan?" asked Charlie. Andrew smiled mysteriously. "Remember the store where I worked before Olympus? The one that fired me and treated me so badly? Well, it turns out they're going through financial difficulties. I'm thinking of buying it." James and Charlie exchanged looks of surprise. "But Mr. Morgan," James began, "after how they treated you." Andrew raised a hand to stop him. "This isn't about revenge, James. It's about taking our message even further. Imagine, we transform that store, implement our ethical business model, create more opportunities for young people like Mary. It would be like closing a circle." Charlie nodded slowly, a smile forming on his face. "It's brilliant, Mr. Morgan. It would be the ultimate proof that our model can work anywhere, even in the most challenging environments." "Exactly," said Andrew. "And I want you two to lead this project." James and Charlie looked at each other, surprised but excited by the challenge. "It will be an honor, Mr. Morgan," said James, his voice full of determination. "We'll make you proud," added Charlie. Andrew smiled, looking at the two men who had become much more than employees to him. They were his family, his legacy. "I'm already proud," he said softly. "Now let's change the world of luxury, one store at a time." As the three men began to discuss the details of their new project, the sun shone brightly through the office windows, as if the universe itself was giving its approval to their plans. Outside, the city bustled with activity, oblivious to the momentous moment unfolding in the Olympus office. But soon, very soon, the whole world would feel the impact of Andrew Morgan's vision and his team. The story of Olympus, which had begun with a young, looked-down-upon salesman and an arrogant luxury store, was about to write its most exciting chapter, and this time they weren't just changing one store or one industry, they were changing the way the world viewed success, luxury, and social responsibility. Andrew Morgan's journey was far from over. In fact, in many ways, it was just beginning. 1 year had passed since that day in Andrew's office, when they had decided to embark on the adventure of transforming the store that had once rejected him. Now, Andrew stood in front of that store's building, ready for the grand reopening. The building, which had once looked neglected and unattractive, now shone with a renovated facade. A large sign announced, "Phoenix Luxury, an Olympus experience." Charlie and James were by his side, their faces a mixture of pride and nervousness. "Are you ready, Mr. Morgan?" asked Charlie, adjusting his tie. Andrew nodded, a serene smile on his face. "More than ready, Charlie. This is the moment I've been waiting for over 20 years. James, who had personally overseen the implementation of the New Horizons program at Phoenix Luxury, spoke with contained emotion. "Mr. Morgan, there's someone who wants to see you before the opening ceremony." Intrigued, Andrew followed James into the store. There, waiting nervously, was an older man with grey hair and tired eyes. Andrew recognized him immediately. It was Edward Vincent, the former manager who had fired him so many years ago. "Mr. Morgan," Edward began, his voice trembling, "I know I'm probably the last person you want to see today, but I needed to be here. I needed to apologize in person." Andrew looked at the man in front of him, searching within himself for any trace of the resentment he had once felt. To his surprise, he found nothing but compassion. "Edward," Andrew said softly, "that was a long time ago." "I know," Edward replied, tears forming in his eyes. "But the harm I caused, the way I treated you, I've lived with that regret all these years. When I heard about what you had accomplished with Olympus, how you were changing the industry, I realized how wrong I was." Andrew put a hand on Edward's shoulder. "We all make mistakes, Edward. The important thing is to learn from them and try to be better." Edward nodded, wiping away his tears. "You're a great man, Mr. Morgan. Much better than I ever was. I just wanted you to know how proud I am to see what you've become, in spite of me." Andrew felt a wave of emotion. At that moment, he understood that the circle had truly closed. He was no longer the hurt young man trying to prove himself. He was a man who had learned the true value of forgiveness and compassion. "Thank you, Edward," said Andrew. "Your presence here today means a lot to me. Would you like to stay for the opening ceremony?" Edward looked at him in surprise. "Are you serious?" I'd love to." As they prepared for the ceremony, Andrew couldn't help but reflect on how far he had come. From that young, rejected salesman to the man who was now changing the luxury industry, his journey had been full of challenges, triumphs, and, above all, personal growth. The opening ceremony was an event filled with emotion. Andrew, surrounded by his team, cut the red ribbon that marked the beginning of a new era for Phoenix luxury. Among the crowd, he could see familiar faces: Mary, who had flown in from Paris for the event, the New Horizons interns, now proud employees, and even some of his competitors who had come to witness the next chapter in the ethical luxury revolution. When it came time for his speech, Andrew looked at the audience and felt a deep gratitude. "Over 20 years ago," he began, "I was fired from this very store. At that moment, I thought it was the end of my dreams, but today I understand that it was just the beginning of an incredible journey." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the attentive faces. "Phoenix. Luxury is not just a luxury store. It's a symbol of what we can achieve when we dare to dream big, when we refuse to be defined by our failures, and when we understand that true luxury is not in what we possess, but in how we treat others." Andrew continued, his voice full of passion. "This place represents second chances, not just for me, but for every young person who goes through our New Horizons program, for every customer who walks through those doors, and for the luxury industry as a whole. We are redefining what success means in business, demonstrating that it's possible to be profitable and ethical, luxurious and conscious." Looking at Charlie and James, who were standing by his side, Andrew smiled. "None of this would have been possible without the incredible team around me. They are living proof that when you give people a chance, when you treat them with respect and allow them to shine, they can achieve extraordinary things." Finally, Andrew looked directly at the camera that was broadcasting the event live. "To everyone watching this, I want to say, no matter where you are in your journey, no matter how many times you've been rejected or looked down upon, never stop believing in yourself. Respect, integrity, and perseverance will always prevail." As he concluded his speech, the audience erupted in applause. Andrew felt a wave of emotion wash over him. He had closed a circle, yes, but he had also opened the door to a new chapter, full of infinite possibilities. That night, as Andrew observed the celebration from a quiet corner, he felt a deep sense of peace. He had transformed his pain into purpose, his rejection into a revolution, and in the process he had discovered that true luxury was not in the products he sold, but in the lives he touched and the second chances he offered. The story of Andrew Morgan, the boy who was once looked down upon and who was now changing the world, was a testament to the power of perseverance, compassion, and respect. And as he looked to the future, Andrew knew that the best was yet to come, because in the world of Olympus and Phoenix luxury, every day was a new opportunity to make the world a little better, one customer at a time, one life at a time. And so, with a heart full of gratitude and eyes set on the horizon, Andrew Morgan prepared for the next chapter of his extraordinary adventure. As the celebration continued into the night, Andrew found himself in a quiet moment of reflection. He thought about the long journey that had brought him to this point, The struggles, the triumphs, and the countless lives that had been changed along the way, Mary approached him, her eyes shining with admiration and gratitude. "Mr. Morgan," she said, "I just wanted to thank you again. What you've done here, it's not just changing the luxury industry, it's changing lives." Andrew smiled warmly at her. "Mary, it's people like you who make all of this worthwhile. Your success is our success." As they talked, Andrew noticed Charlie and James deep in conversation with a group of young interns. The enthusiasm and energy radiating from them was palpable, even from across the room. "You know, Mary," Andrew said, "when I started this journey, I thought it was about proving something to those who had doubted me. But now I realize it's about so much more than that. It's about creating a legacy of compassion, opportunity, and ethical business practices." Mary nodded thoughtfully. "And that legacy will continue long after we're gone. The ripple effect of what you've started here, it's immeasurable." As the night wore on, Andrew found himself surrounded by well-wishers, each with a story to tell about how Olympus or Phoenix Luxury had impacted their lives. There were former interns who had gone on to start their own businesses, customers who spoke of how the company's ethical practices had changed their shopping habits, and even competitors who admitted that Andrew's vision had forced them to reevaluate their own business models. Towards the end of the evening, Andrew gathered his core team, Charlie, James, Lisa, and a few others, for a quiet moment away from the crowds. "I want to thank each of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "What we've accomplished here, it's beyond anything I could have imagined, and it's because of your dedication, your belief in our vision, and your unwavering commitment to doing what's right." Charlie spoke up, his eyes gleaming with unshed tears. "Mr. Morgan, I think I speak for all of us when I say that you've given us so much more than just a job. You've given us a purpose, a family, and a chance to be part of something truly transformative." James nodded in agreement. "When you gave me that second chance, Mr. Morgan, I never dreamed it would lead to this. You've shown us all the power of forgiveness and the importance of believing in people's capacity for change." As they stood there, this small group that had become a family, Andrew felt a sense of completion. But it wasn't an ending, far from it. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with even greater possibilities and challenges. "So," Andrew said with a smile, "what's next for us?" The group looked at each other, excitement building. "Well," Charlie began, "we've been thinking, what if we took the New Horizons program global, not just in our stores, but as a standalone initiative? That could partner with other companies, even outside the luxury sector," James chimed in. "And we could expand our sustainable sourcing practices, create a certification program for ethical luxury that could become the industry standard." Lisa added, "There's also been interest from several universities in creating a curriculum based on our business model. We could be shaping the next generation of ethical business leaders." Andrew listened, his heart swelling with pride and excitement. "These are all fantastic ideas," he said, "and they all share a common thread. They're about spreading our message and our practices beyond our own walls. That's exactly what we need to be doing." As they continued to discuss and plan, Andrew felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey that had begun with a young man's humiliation in a luxury store had led to this moment. A moment where that same man stood at the head of a movement that was reshaping an entire industry and touching countless lives. But even as he looked to the future, Andrew knew that the core of their mission would remain the same. It was about treating every person with dignity and respect, about giving second chances, and about proving that success and ethics could go hand in hand. As the night drew to a close and the last of the guests departed, Andrew took a final walk through the gleaming aisles of Phoenix Luxury. He paused at the spot where, all those years ago, he had stood as a young salesman, full of dreams and ambition. "We did it," he whispered to his younger self. "We showed them all." With a smile, Andrew turned off the lights and stepped out into the cool night air. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new lives to change, and he was ready for all of it. The story of Andrew Morgan and Olympus was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning, and as he looked up at the stars twinkling in the night sky, Andrew knew that the best was yet to come.